So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series, we talk all things cloud with experts and advocates from right across the industry, covering a wide variety of topics from skills and careers through to technical overviews and softer skills. So, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. It really is appreciated. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us a comment, a like, or subscribe to the channel. That'd be awesome. So on that note, my next guest is a senior customer engineer at Microsoft. He's a blogger, a public speaker, and he's got a huge passion for technology and sharing that learning. So based out of Tampa, Florida, I'm excited to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With, Mr. Chris Ayers. Hey, Chris, how you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Johnny, how's it going?
Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you, sir. And thank you for rearranging for me. It's really appreciated. Glad to have you on the show to say hello for an hour or so.
Oh, not a problem at all. I love talking technology with other people and just sharing, thoughts and ideas about how things are headed.
Well, look, this is the whole point. I mean, we've got a pre-canned few areas that we're going to discuss in a second, Chris. But I guess, look, before we get stuck in, do you want to give yourself a little bit more of an introduction? Let us know where you're working at the moment and how that's going and stuff like that. Would be cool.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a senior customer engineer on the Fast Track for Azure team at Microsoft. I joined about 4 months ago. So one of the things we do is we help customers in their journey to Azure. Pretty much anybody with an Azure subscription can take advantage of Fast Track, if they meet certain criteria and get nominated. And so what we do is we help remove roadblocks. Maybe there's multiple services out there with competing best practices that don't exactly align. We'll help you resolve that, go update the documentation, talk to the product groups, try to make the platform better to help everybody on the platform. So I'm an Azure engineer that helps solve problems.
No, absolutely, and it's a great. And I've spoken to quite a few people that work for Fast Track, and you guys are really at the cutting edge with customers. Like you say, helping guide those customers through, and it's a great service that's offered by Microsoft, obviously, to, like you say, to unblock those roadblocks. But I mean, Chris, how did you get to that point in your career? What was it that got you to the point for working for Microsoft? I mean, it's such a great company. I'm assuming it's the same to work for. What guided you there?
Well, I mean, I'm not exactly a spring chicken. I've been programming since second grade back on an Apple II. I actually remember doing the original, it was probably version 2 of Flight Simulator, where it had like 10 frames a minute, I've always thought of Microsoft as this amazing place. And through my career, I really took a lot of development classes in the 90s. I started working at small and medium companies for a large portion of my career. And I never thought I could be at Microsoft. And I think that was actually a wrong thought. Well, obviously now, but back then as well. When I started getting into consulting, that was really when I started getting closer to the Microsoft teams and people, and kind of started to solidify my goal of I want to be there and I want to be part of this amazing place. And now that I'm here, I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it does. Certainly the people I've spoken to certainly say that it's a great place to work for. And then look, you're kind of like at that cutting edge of technology. Certainly, over the last 2 years, technology has exploded, Chris. And I'm guessing your learnings and the kind of development of your own personal being and technical expertise has kind of had to go through this transition of certainly working with cloud technologies. I mean, how did you find that kind of coming from that traditional world into the cloud world? Were there any kind of takeaways you can think of?
Well, so in the mid 90s, when I was first learning how to program, my instructor had us install Cygwin, and this was like Red Hat 4, like not even Red Hat Enterprise, like Red Hat 4, Cygwin, learning like using Bash Shell and VI back in like 95. And so I had a strong Linux education earlier, and I started seeing this divide from people that, oh, I'm a Windows dev, I don't want to learn other things like Unix or like that. That's something else. I don't want to learn that. And so I started seeing people put up walls about being safe inside the little space that they're comfortable in. Later in my career, I built PCs for a while. I joined a networking company and I learned how to pull cable and configure routers. We were building a firewall appliance in like 98, 99. So right when a lot of these little boxes started coming out. And so I learned networking and security early in my career. I was a military contractor for a bit. And so I was doing multi-threaded programming and Unix, and I was learning efficiency, and every job I've kind of learned new techniques and new technologies or algorithms. And then I had a stumble in my career a little bit, and I was doing system administration for a bit, and I started administrating Macs and Windows servers, and so I started to get a little bit of breadth. And there's a book on my shelf which I love and I read called Range, about how generalists succeed in a specialized world. And even though I've been focused on technology, I've learned about infrastructure, learned about networking and security. I've focused on development, and so adding new skills wherever they came from never scared me. But I worked, when I moved down to Tampa, I started working at a company where we were building dashboards and business tools, and we were trying to hire people, and I saw. And this was around ASP 3-4 time period. So there were people that had been building tools in .NET 1.1 and 1.2, and they just put their heads down. And they just worked on the project for 2-3 years. And when they looked up, MVC was out. Like it wasn't just web support anymore. There was MVC. There was encouragement for devs to learn JavaScript. Knockout was the thing. CoffeeScript was the thing. ECMA, 3, 4, and 5 were really starting to come out. Dynamic web apps were a thing. And so that's when I started really diving into learning, like more than before. I never wanted to be held back in my career, because I just put on blinders and put my head down, and the world and the internet passed me by. Yeah, because I saw it. I saw it a lot, and it scared me. I'm like, I don't ever want to be that person. I want to be on the edge. I want to be learning. And even if you're looking at virtual machines and servers, we used to order hardware. Then we used to have racks. Then we're like, oh, VMware, we can make virtual machines. Now, like the world has changed in 10, 15 years, and how we do things has completely changed. Now we have PaaS. Now we have containers. So I went from that space to a couple other roles. I've been in probably every service you can think of: manufacturing, finance, retail, legal, education. And so that breadth has helped me as a technologist, never wanting to be a manager, never wanting to be a business person. I just want to focus on the technology, because technology is easy to understand. I was definitely that nerd.
Yeah,
and it changed.
Stay away from people management, absolutely. But no, I mean, you mentioned then, Chris. Obviously, breadth. The book that you read around that kind of that breadth of knowledge or breadth of experience. How important do you think that is in today's world as an IT ad? I mean, would you give that kind of advice to somebody coming into the industry now today? I mean, how would you suggest they tackle that as a new person coming into the industry? Because I give that kid in a sweet shop analogy. There's so much tech. There's so many ways you can go. Have you got any kind of guiding principles?
Oh yeah. So I've participated a couple times in 100 devs, like coffee chats with people, and it's a very focused thing on HTML and JavaScript, and that's fine. I learned earlier, and I've continued to reinforce this. Not every programming language feels good. Like sometimes you're taught something and you're like, this is extremely rigid. You have to do it this way, and it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't line up with how you think, or it's not where you're happy. Like some people love doing HTML and CSS and seeing things come alive, move, and take shape in front of their eyes. Other people love building an engine in their head and like executing the code and like nailing the algorithm, like the Project Euler stuff, and like seeing the right answer come out. I learned in like I took a lot of formal stuff in like Pascal and Delphi, and I hated it. It was so rigid, and it's a BNF language. Like you had to have. I just felt too structured, and Java felt too wordy. I really liked C and then C++, and when I found C#, I fell in love, and I have never looked back. Like the language has the right level of expressiveness for me, and it lets me solve the problems how I want to solve them. I bring up Notepad as a tool all the time and just scribble out some code or an algorithm or a function or a method. And sometimes I write code to write code for myself, or I write code to like generate things because that's just it feels right. And what I've given advice to people is, hey, try the tool. Try JavaScript, try HTML, try whatever the course you're taking. If it doesn't feel right, don't be upset. Like that is not the end all be all of technology. And you can also kind of go backwards. There's a company you want to work at. Look at what they're hiring for. Look at their tech stack. Look at what they say they use. Look at those couple of things. Like, if they're using Go or Ruby, go take a look at Go. Go take a look at Ruby, and maybe kind of point yourself in the direction of the tools to end up at the company you want to be at. Or if you really like a tool or a language or a framework, get good at it, and then see who's using it, and then go work there. Or try to. I mean, those are some options. But you never have to feel restricted. A lot of programming is just learning how to think, where the semicolons go and where the parameters go. They just move around a little bit. If you know how to break a problem down and plug it in. Yeah.
No, and it's an interesting concept, because I think this has come up, certainly conversations I've had with other people across community and people in the place that I work, is this whole concept. I think, we're probably of a similar age, I'm guessing, Chris, but judging by the beards anyway, at least. But, that fleck of grey kind of gives the distinguished look, I like to think. But it just means we've been tinkering for far too long, I think, doesn't it? But so, I mean, I personally went through that kind of scenario, computer science degree, learning to program, picked up, I think it was actually an object-oriented program called Smalltalk. I don't know if you remember that back in the day. Yep. And C++ as well. And great, had that conceptually, moved into a career in tech, kind of stayed on the operational side of the fence. So learned a lot of VB scripting, to kind of and bat files, and when PowerShell came around in, sort of 10, 12 years ago. Yeah, it was the PowerShell kind of scripting and automation side of things. And the whole software dev world kind of, I wouldn't say passed me by. I had it mindfully there. I did a bit in back in the day. It was very rewarding, and I enjoyed a lot working in that space. But then I personally never got to flex my muscles. Now, when you come into the cloud world and you can see that this whole DevOps thing is going on, where I think fundamentally software developers are expected to know a lot more about infrastructure services, but then infrastructure and operations folk are expected to seemingly know a lot more than maybe they're comfortable with from a software dev perspective. I mean, is that how you see the world?
Kind of. So I started getting involved in the cloud when I got into consulting. So I actually don't have any degree. I dropped out of school because I had my son when I was 16. So he's 26 now. I'm about to be 43 in about 2 weeks. So I was working full time, going to school full time, and being a full time parent. And one thing gave, and it was school. Everybody's journey is different. But when I got into consulting after some of those other roles, that was when I first got exposure into Azure, and it's definitely changed. This was very soon after it launched, back in the like the ASM days before ARM templates, and really a lot of infrastructure as code took off.
Yeah.
And I did infrastructure at times, and the evolution I've seen from, because I've pulled racks and I've built VMs and I've managed that, went from, well, you have your script. I've got my script of things I need to go out and build for my server, and so you see infrastructure people started making batch files, making PowerShell, making things. This might have been before Chef or Puppet really came out. Maybe you started making a VM image and trying to bake it, and then, oh, we'll just reinstantiate this template and name it the right thing. But it was still very much a cattle pets type of thing. You were manually doing a lot of steps. You might try to automate them, but there's that wall between, well, developers do source code. Developers do build and release servers. Infrastructure guys don't really do that. We maintain the build and release servers. We don't use them to build and release. And the same thing applies to the dev side. I need a server. Yeah, I don't know. It needs 8 cores and 64 gigs of memory. It's going to serve a static page. Like, they don't understand sometimes. Well, we only have so many resources in our data center. We only have so many resources on that host. Do you really need a 30 terabyte drive? Like our Lunn only has some, our storage only has so much. And so there was that constant battle back and forth between like the available resources and how long it's going to take to build it. And DevOps really came around. I think after a lot of individual technologies started coming forward and unifying some of those conversations. I started with my background. I stared moving towards DevOps, and I joined an amazing DevOps company, a small little one out of Orlando. Nebia. They got acquired by New Signature. That got acquired by Cognizant, and with another company called 10th Magnitude was the Cognizant Microsoft Business Group. And I started being a leader there and managing people. And DevOps was something we constantly had to educate people on, especially coming out of enterprises and just adjusting their shifting. DevOps and on the infrastructure side, when you talk about the main things that come up, I think, are infrastructure as code. But it also has implications on business continuity, disaster recovery, building out environments, and just changing mindsets on like releasing control in some ways, or having guardrails in place in governance. So the governance conversations, like the first ones we have with operations people, because there's still that back and forth between devs and ops people. Like, well, the dev wants to spin up a thing. Can we let them? Well. Put governance in place, like limit what they can spin up in subscription. Do they need to spin it up in East Asia if they're in the UK? Do they need to spin it up in Canada if they're in Europe? Like limitations on the locations. If you don't need a 64 core machine, limit the SKUs on what they can build. And it's also directors and business people need to understand CapEx and OpEx. Like, it's a different investment model. So there's this blur of conversations that happen, and they all kind of feed into each other. But I know when I build servers, I always had to go, first I install this, then I install that, then I do this thing, then I have, and saying, here's a YAML file that describes what my environment should look like, and I don't need to care how it gets there.
Yeah.
It scares some people that you're just saying, go build me the thing, instead of, I know how to build the thing, you should do it in this order.
No, absolutely, and I think it's quite crazy, isn't it, to think that we have gone. It's back to what you said. I think at the start of this is that to be that person that wouldn't just rely on what they knew, but to be constantly aware of how technology is moving on. And look, it's moving on a such a frequent basis even today, and even in some of these cool new. I say new. They're not new. They're new to certain people, but they've been around for a long time. Some of these things that we're calling new today, but it's like you say. It's interesting to hear you say that you have to constantly educate enterprise businesses on DevOps. I mean, how are you finding that, even from a fast track perspective now with businesses, looking to move towards that kind of cloud native key buzzword that we're hearing a lot about, certainly over the last few years. Are you finding those conversations are becoming more and more prevalent, or is it smoke and mirrors? What's your take on that, Chris?
So I know you hinted at the beginning about soft skills, and I think one of the things that's really enabled me to be successful in fast track and speaking is I realized as an engineer, as a DevOps consultant, that I can't just talk to devs and the ops. I have to talk to the managers. I have to talk to the directors. I need buy-in. I need their alignment that we have to trust the CI/CD process to release their code. That maybe automated tests and build pipelines can have a level of quality they're okay with it going out to QA or going out to prod. And so I had to start learning how to communicate more effectively with higher level people inside organizations. And you have to start talking about business, and you have to start talking about their priorities. You learn this in consulting. I think I've learned this in a lot of fields. Like you have to understand the language and the motivation and the customer of your customers. Mm-hmm. You have to understand it well. Like they don't just exist in a vacuum. They exist to provide a service to somebody. What are their motivations? What are their regulations? What are their rules? What is their tech stack? Why do they do things a certain way? You have to have some empathy, and you have to listen and learn. And so when I start trying to talk, and that actually led me to becoming a manager, managing a team of like 10 people, multiple levels, Azure infrastructure, DevOps, and AppMod. And so I would go in and have conversations with directors and managers and C-suite people, the CIOs and CTOs, on why they should do DevOps, how they should try to transform their business, why they need to rethink configuration. So I still see organizations today that have checked into their repositories. Here's a dev, here's a stage, here's a prod file with connection strings and passwords. Still see that. Mm-hmm. I still see Git flow and people building binaries 2 or 3 times to test in different environments, and what they send out to prod has never been tested by a human, because they tested a binary that was in QA, or they tested a binary that was in dev that was completely different than what went to prod. I have conversations like I have talks coming up in multiple places around feature flags, and I've given this talk probably for a year now. Blows people's minds. They're like, "What's a feature flag?" Mm-hmm. It's an if, and how can we leverage it to do Agile? You can leverage it to do a lot of things. I have talks on how configuration management works in .NET, how dependency injection works. Some of these concepts blow people's minds. Like I've talked to senior engineers at enterprise organizations that have never heard of dependency injection.
Yeah. Okay.
So there are people that don't read, that don't look outside their immediate problem or work, or they go and find out how to do the thing and they plug it in, and maybe they don't understand why they're doing the thing, or is there a different way to do the thing, or maybe solid is a practice they care about, but they might forgot the last two. The inversion and dependency.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Is that everybody, and it's back to the point around, how do we all keep up to speed with the pace of change? Because to a certain extent, we've all got a 9 to 5, or we've got a paid piece of work and project that we're working on, we're focused on, and I guess not everybody's got the luxury of spare time in their day job to kind of upskill, and not every company is quite as facilitating as others. Maybe I think is probably the nicest way of putting it. But and plus it's a burden. Some people are great at learning from, I guess, reading material. People are great at learning from others, showing them how to do stuff. And I guess once you mix all of that in, look, like you say, you're going to find scenarios where you've got a very much a seasoned veteran of a particular technology completely oblivious to maybe a new concept or a new way that would save so much time. And I guess this is where the world of DevOps seems to be absolutely hammering through at the moment. And I mean, are you finding, Chris, that a lot more people are going down the road of DevOps? And back to that point around cloud native technologies, is DevOps the kind of the door opener to allowing people to understand cloud native maybe a little bit easier?
My mentor who really taught me, evangelized DevOps to me, always said, you can't do DevOps without the cloud, and you can't do the cloud without DevOps. And I think that's true more now than ever. And we are seeing people that are looking at the data center, and they're trying to look at the cloud, and we start educating them on, well, you don't really need to worry too much about the server. You can do app services and app service plans. And yes, you can store files. You might just need to store it in like a blob account or something else. Like you have to assume the thing you're running in gets ripped out from under you. Educating on containers. There's different varieties of people that are interested in containers and Kubernetes. There are some orgs from past roles, from this role, where you can tell a leader in the organization read an article about it and said, we're going to go to Kubernetes or containers. And then there's others that have a real need for scalability, reliability, and the features provided by containerization, and they want to go that way. But some of the orgs are, hey, we're Windows devs in Visual Studio. I don't know Linux. I don't know containers. I don't know .NET Core. We're in Framework. And so there's a path that has to be kind of figured out just to kind of start untangling. Well, I run an IIS, I put my code here, and I right-click deploy to this is where DevOps can start introducing automation and repeatability. We can start making it run once or build once, run multiple places. We can start isolating configuration into environments. Hey, you can define with infrastructure as code what you want. You can define, using Helm or Kubernetes, like here's the orchestration that you're doing today with a load balancer, multiple VMs. Like you can get better density of things. And so we have to keep what I usually do is I share Learn modules. The Microsoft Docs platform has an amazing amount of content. I recommend to people, there's a lot of newsletters and link aggregators going on out there. A lot of times I might spend 15 minutes over lunch or at the end of my day and look through the link aggregations, and go, oh, that looks interesting. Oh, that looks interesting. And I'll just click and read an article. But sometimes it's just seeing the headlines of what's coming or what's happening is enough to keep people aware, or at least something in the back of your mind in case. Like you don't have to go super deep on it. Like we always say, T-shaped developer back in the day. You're a mile wide and an inch deep in a lot of things, and then maybe you're really deep in one thing. But just knowing something exists or something is possible can completely change your outlook on how you solve a problem.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I think it's just that awareness, isn't it? Is that for those that maybe are so fixated on the day job, is just to keep those link aggregators are a great way of just keeping up to speed. And I mean, maybe this leads us on to that kind of concept of community, because I know for me it's been a great help in turning to community a bit more. You mentioned yourself, Chris, that you're out actively doing talks on some really cool areas that I guess we can find links to on your website, which will be listed below. But I mean, talk to us a bit about your experience with community and kind of what that means for you and how you're active in it at the moment, Chris.
Well, like I said, a lot of it started when I started being a consultant. I started looking at meetups. Our consultant companies a lot of times need certificates. So professional services companies use their employee certifications to get like gold or silver, level with like an Azure or at Microsoft or AWS or Google. And so they encourage you to get certified, and they encourage you to like learn technology so you can do more varied roles. But I started going to meetups. In Tampa, there's a number of different meetup groups. One of my friends did a lot of JavaScript, and he got me into functional programming. I always say I'm a .NET dev, but I learned front end. I learned Angular and React and Vue. I got into functional and was like really enjoying that. And then I started doing like functional programming in C#. And then I dived into F#, and I learned Erlang and Haskell because it was interesting. We would do like coding katas at some of the local meetups. I've seen a number of people in the industry talk on functions and serverless programming. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Or logic apps or ARM templates. I started trying to attend to like Azure Global Bootcamp. And then I presented at Azure Global Bootcamp. I realized that I enjoyed educating people. You can go and Google or Bing, like, how do I instantiate this variable? But having experience knowing like when to define a class structure and when to use property or field, like giving that insight on when to do something and when not to do something is what I try to talk about. So I have a talk on feature flags, and I go through a lot of use cases for feature flags. And I do have a couple of demos. But it really doesn't focus on the individual lines of code. It focuses on the scenarios and the situations and when you want to use it. Because that's the stuff that either you do it wrong and it hurts, or you have a little bit of guidance that makes it easier.
Yeah.
And then speaking, I paid attention. I heard from the meetups, and now what I do is when I see people or conferences on Twitter that are talking about a cool event, or hey, I'm attending this event, I go and follow that event, and I look for when they do a CFP, call for paper, and I submit a talk, or I look at the talk aggregators that will send out links to all the open talks, or I use Sessionize, which will let you discover talks where you can submit. And now I've volunteered to help organize Tampa Bay DevOps Days. So I just reviewed like 80 submissions of talks, and I'm helping organize that for May.
Oh, that's awesome stuff. And I guess, like myself, when I first into community a little bit more than I was already, I think that the kind of knowledge that you gain just by being part of that community, it almost doesn't feel like you're actively learning. I mean, did you feel the same way, Chris? Like you say, those, looking at newsletters or link aggregators or the odd video here and there, you might be doing it out of the passion, is what I found. But that's all learning. Yeah, I guess that's ways in which people can kind of help themselves.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm a video gamer. I'm a board gamer. I go and play games on the weekends. Sometimes I'll sit down and write a blog post, or I'll like, hey, I really want to show this cool DevOps pipeline. I want to show this cool scenario. I haven't seen it out there, and I want to make it as an example so I can point people to like, hey, here's this problem I had. Here's how I solved it. I think most of my career. No, I'd say pretty much, my entire career, I've definitely been a giver of technology, a giver of knowledge and learning. If you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, I'm constantly finding cool and interesting bits of technology or links, and I share them or I retweet them. I blog not as often as I'd like to. I'm actually probably going to start making some videos soon that might be a little easier to just sit down and record. Like how to do stuff in Bicep or CI/CD, with actions on GitHub. I've been really diving into like Mermaid.js, doing diagrams there, and I've converted my slides from PowerPoint into Markdown with something called Mark. So I just love playing with technology, and I like to share those learnings with others. And like, hey, there's this cool thing I found. Check it out, man.
Yeah, and it just kind of aids to that whole, that feeling of passion and wanting to get it out there, I guess. And it's a cool thing to do. And like I say, I recently looked through your website, Chris. I can see some of the fantastic things that you're doing, and it's great to see. To be honest, it's it's certainly something that's close to my heart, and I've encouraged others to kind of take part in this thing that we love and we call community. But Chris, look, this has been such a fantastic chat. Look, there is one last question I want to spring on you before we wrap up this conversation. But thanks so much for joining me. But in the interests of understanding how your mind is working, why are we doing all of this learning? Where are we going with technology, do you think, Chris, in your opinion? What's the next big bet in technology from your perspective?
I've really been paying attention to containerization. If you look at like Azure app services, you can run those with containers. Like you can point a container to an app service. You can also go full Kubernetes and have all this orchestration and management of your infrastructure. I think what we're starting to see is this middle point, like Azure container apps, where you can get orchestration without full-blown Kubernetes cluster that you're managing all the ins and outs of, and you're starting to see some abstractions over Kubernetes and GitOps. Like those things are starting to really get my attention a lot. I think GitOps has been growing for the last year or so, and I think it's really going to continue to grow. I see a lot of traction around Web3, in the ether, people talking about Web3, but I'm not a fan of a lot of blockchain things.
No, so yeah, I guess it's. I mean, it's cool that you say that, actually, because that's like the case in point, around containerization. Just to pick you up on that point first, the fact that we started off with Docker and Docker containers that we could run, from our desktop PCs if we wanted to, and run these apps in containers, to the concept now of running these on bits of infrastructure in an orchestrated manner. And you mentioned container applications now, which is kind of this middle ground, and the technology keeps abstracting, going full hog, and coming back. And Dapper, of course,
Dapper is really cool, abstracting the container patterns that we're starting to see rise. I want a pub sub, plug it into something, and it runs on the service. I need service locator. I need secrets. And so leveraging Dapper, it can handle a lot of the patterns that we're seeing rise in the containerization space, but it abstracts it away so that you can just write it for that and kind of plug in what you need to on the back end.
So maybe that is the future then. We need to go out and learn more about containerization. Hey, Chris.
Yeah. Take a look at Dapper. Take a look at Project Pi. I think both of those are really cool. GitOps, like Flux, is really neat. And container apps.
No, awesome stuff, Chris. And like you say, as far as the Web 3.0 goes, this blockchain, I'm not sure I fully get it. I kind of think I get it, but then I just go, as for the kids, let them play with something. So rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
But Chris, look, this has been such a fantastic chat. Thanks for coming on and saying hello to me for this time. It's been insightful, and best of luck for the up and coming talks and the plans that you've got with the user groups. But for now, thanks for being such an awesome guest, Chris.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. But bye for now. I'll catch you on the socials.
All right.